Welcome back to another episode of the Simone NBA Show. I'm your host, Jack Simone. You can find me on Twitter at Jack Simone NBA. Show is brought to you by Heavy Sports. You can follow them on Twitter at Heavy on Sports. Check out all their other social channels next to me on YouTube, which you should subscribe to. You know the drill by now. But I've got an exciting show for you guys today because I had the pleasure of having Brandon Davies on the show, former NBA player, former 76er, former net, played in the EuroLeague for a long time now, FC Barcelona for a few years, and now is with Olimpia Milano, playing with some other former NBA players like Nikola Mirotic, Luigi Ditome, Devon Hall. I talked to him about his time at BYU as well, where he played with Jimmer Fredette, what that was like, his time overseas, what his experiences have been like, and also, some stories about the NBA, the process, 76ers. He talked about his time with the Clippers and getting traded in the NBA as well. So it was a really cool episode, some great stories in there. I hope you guys enjoy it. Later on, I'll talk about the Donovan Mitchell trade because it happened the day we released last week's episode, of course. So you'll get my thoughts on that and some thoughts about the Knicks RJ Barrett situation, which, spoiler alert, a little shady to me. So, first up, interview with Brandon Davies, and then later on, you can catch me talking Knicks, Cavs, Donovan Mitchell. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. Here's me talking to Brandon. All right, and now I'd like to welcome 4-year BYU big man, former Philadelphia 76er and Brooklyn net, EuroLeague standout with multiple clubs, most recently FC Barcelona, and now at Olimpia Milano, Brandon Davies. Long intro, but how you doing? Thank you for joining me.
I'm good. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know you must be busy getting ready for the season. You guys have a pretty stacked roster this year. Guys like Nikola Mirotic, Devon Hall, Luigi Ditome. It's looking like it's going to be a great one for you guys. It'll be your first season at Olimpia Milano, a club with lots of NBA connections, as I just listed off, and in the past, including Danilo Gallinari and Mike James. How does the iconic Italian club compare to your time in the NBA so far?
Well, I mean, I've been here, I think, 2.5 weeks now, and it's like this team is basically an NBA team out of the States, as far as, personnel-wise, the players, a lot of the players you listed, but not just that, just like as a club, the way the facilities are set up, the way the practices are set up, they have, the needs of the player comes above everything as far as, what the staff is, willing to do for you. And, they have food for us. They have, the trainers, cold pool, cryo, everything we need. We have it in our practice, in the same gym where we play, practice facility. That's a lot similar to, a lot of NBA teams as well.
Yeah, plus Italy versus Northeastern Utah. It's got to be, it's probably a nice little difference there too. And also I have to ask, Ettore Messina, basketball legend, one of the greatest resumes you'll find in NBA, EuroLeague, just the basketball world in general. What's it been like working with him? I know you said only 2.5 weeks, but have you, had the chance to talk to him about what's it been like working with a guy like that?
Yeah, I mean, he was a big piece of, me making the decision to come here, just our conversations alone with him, before even putting on, changing the colors and putting on the red. There was already a connection between, between me and him as far as my role, what he expects from me, what he knows I'm capable of, and how I'll be used on the team. And, like you said, knowing and hearing, things from a coach as decorated as he is, and, his willingness to also adapt to things that, I want to do. That's, it's early in the season, but, he's always been honest and putting our relationship first. So that was a big thing for me. And now hopefully we can, have great years together and win a lot of titles.
I hope so. Bright things, big things in the future. But kind of in that same vein, I've heard in other interviews, former players talk about the difference between how fans and teams and organizations in general treat players overseas versus in the NBA. What's your experience been like in regard to that sort of thing?
I mean, I think in the NBA, there's been, especially for like the young guys and stuff, there's a lot of like babysitting, I guess you can call it, that goes involved. There's a lot of guys who kind of hold your hands through a lot of things, but over here, at least with my experiences, that it's, you kind of got to learn on the fly. I've learned my first year overseas was my first time out of the country, and I was actually here in Italy, a town called Varese, which is 30 minutes from here, and that was my first full year. I was fully immersed, not a whole lot of English, just kind of had to, you know, just got married, so I just had to figure things out and, on and off the court. So there was a lot of growth involved in a little bit of short amount of time.
For sure. And how about the fans? I mean, we've all seen viral videos of like fireworks being lit in the stands. I'm not saying every arena is like that, but how are the fans like overseas versus in the States?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like you can feel, more of the passion here from, European fans, especially when you get, in bigger clubs that have been supporting their club for years. They're not just coming to the games and putting on T-shirts. They're living the everyday life. They want to know how practices were. They want to know. They want to be in the know of everything, and they're crying after losses and not just the championship games and things like that. So, and like you said, there is a lot of big, especially in the EuroLeague arenas where you play in, and you'll get the fireworks, you'll get the taunting all game long. You'll get, there's multiple gyms. The majority of the gyms in the EuroLeague, if it's sold out, you can't hear anything, and your ears are ringing for a couple days after the game. So that's as a basketball player, you dream of playing in places like that, and I've never experienced it as loud and as passionate as I have here overseas.
Yeah, and maybe these are some of the answers you'll give to my next question, but you see guys like Nemanja Bjelica who just decided to go back overseas, leave the NBA. Obviously, it's a little different because he's on the back end of his career a little bit, but in your experience, what are some of the main reasons players can prefer to play in the EuroLeague and other overseas leagues over the NBA?
Well, a lot of it, I think, has to do with a lot of those European players, them coming home. Europe is home to them.
Yeah,
So you get to a point in your career where you're you miss home. You have depending on how your career is going in the NBA, or you're standing on the roster. There's a lot of different factors. For example, a guy like Mirotic, I became really good friends with him. It's a guy who's, a staple shooter in the NBA, very well known. And at the same time, he's, tired of getting traded, moving his family, different countries across, and this is away from home, on top of that. So for him, he's such a great guy, such a family-oriented guy. He wanted to be closer to home and, in a thriving environment. So I think there's a lot of players who have similar stories like that one.
for sure. And I was actually just going to bring up Mirotic in my next question. I was going to say, you played with a lot of legends throughout your career. I mean, Pau Gasol, you played with for a brief stint at Barcelona, Kevin Garnett in the NBA, and then EuroLeague legend Nikola Mirotic, obviously. I know Mirotic, like you mentioned, eventually made the jump to the NBA and established himself there. But in your experience overseas, who's the best player that you've played with that decided not to make the jump, whether it was, their decision or not?
I think, obviously Beard just played in the NBA. I played with a lot of, ex-NBA players, but the guy who hasn't played in the NBA yet, who could and should be there, I think is Vasa Micic. I think he's very capable of holding his own in the NBA and putting up numbers given the right situation and circumstances. So much of the NBA is timing and things like that. And he's just a guy who, loves to play. And he's in a place where he can play, as long as he wants. He's playing at a high level. He has, a high role, really high IQ of the game, and could easily play. He's better than a lot of guys in the NBA who are on current rosters, but you just never know if you're going to play. And there's a lot of different situations that he would face. But if that's probably the number one guy for me.
Gotcha. Yeah, it seems like stability overseas is kind of the main thing guys are looking for versus the NBA, where, like you said, Mirotic, trading and moving, and it seems to be like there's a lot more cohesiveness and safety when you're playing overseas.
Yeah, I mean, even in my like situation, my first deal was, I signed with the Clippers. I was there for a preseason. I got released. The Sixers picked me up 2 days later. I signed a 4-year non-guarantee. Every day was a tryout for me. It was trying to do everything just to get that 15th man, spot.
Yeah.
It's definitely a grind, and then not knowing if I'm going to be sent home the next day. And I made it 2 years there. Was traded to Brooklyn, but um, you know, it's just so much of it is situation. Like I remember playing well. I had like 3 games back to back to back where I think I had like 20, 13, 15. Feeling well. Starting, this is my second year in Philly, and on the trade deadline. So the next day I would be guaranteed for the rest of the year. But the trade deadline, I'm warming up. We're in Atlanta. I'm getting ready to start the game, and Brett Brown pulls me into the office and says, "I can't play tonight. You're being traded to Brooklyn." So I sit out that game. I fly with the team to Brooklyn because we're in a back-to-back. We play Atlanta,
Yeah.
Brooklyn the next night. We fly together. I leave the hotel. I leave the airport. I go to one hotel. Sixers go to another hotel, and then I'm out playing against them the next night. So it's kind of a weird like timing situation for me, but something I'll never forget.
That's crazy. Did you have a revenge game? You get you get back and then the next night.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get a whole lot of minutes. New team, new system, and everything.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it was during the process is what they called it, and
Yep.
I remember talking to Hinkie, and basically, just a real conversation. He was real honest with me. Thanks for here's an undrafted free agent guy who they ended up getting. I think 2 or 3 draft picks, and they traded for Andre Karolinko and Jorge Gutierrez, for an undrafted guy. So he was just basically like, thanks for, in the nicest way possible, thanks for making yourself worth something. But so it's kind of an interesting story, but the rest is history.
It's the process, as they
Yeah.
say. I did want to ask you kind of something similar to that. I have you've played for a bunch of teams, obviously, FC Barcelona, now Olimpia Milano, BYU, top-notch team, the Nets, and the process Sixers. What were some of the defining factors of each, and specifically, what's the biggest difference in the locker room of some of these like competitive teams you played on versus those process Sixers teams?
I mean, that was probably the iconic memory of being with the Sixers was, that the story I just told. But,
Yeah.
going from when I was with the Clippers all through Summer League and the preseason, I was there with, Blake Griffin, Chris Paul, Anton Jamison, DeAndre Jordan, Darren Collison, just so many like veteran guys who, and I remember going in there my first day, and like we're playing one-on-ones. This is my first day as a pro, and it's Anton Jamison, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, and we're just it's a get a stop or stay on defense type of thing, and it's just and this is Lob City Clippers, and going from that, but then at the same time they'll turn around and like they'll dunk on you and abuse you, talk smack to you, and then they're taking you out to dinner, leaving you, making sure you're taken care of off the court. So many different veterans, no matter who it was, they took care of their rookies like they were a family.
Yeah.
And then when I went to Philly, our only rookie was Jason Richardson, who wasn't playing. He wasn't around much, had a serious injury, who also did, kind of take me under his wing, took very good care of me. But the veterans on that team were kind of younger at the time. We had Evan Turner, who's was our pretty good vet, and Thaddeus Young, and then the rest were all just young guys. I think that year had the record for I think we had like 25 different guys on 10 days throughout the
Yeah.
year. So you had new teammates coming in and out, no real voice, that kind of, and then on top of that, going through the whole process of everything, but actually trying to win games and trying to build. And so that was just a night and day difference coming from the Clippers facility and seeing how everything, everything from there evolved from how the veterans were to having no veterans. And so that's been the biggest difference that I saw. Like, and locker room was a big part of that.
Yeah, for sure. I can't imagine. It must have been so weird, like you said, going from just two completely different spaces. I want to kind of jump back a little bit too, briefly. You spent 2 years at BYU with Jimmer Fredette, obviously a 4-year career there as well. Jimmer, obviously one of the most iconic just college players strictly of all time. What was it like to have all that attention on you guys as a team?
I mean, honestly, it was, it was like we were the Beatles. Like, it was that everything was focused on Jimmer. Like, we were even amazed with what he was doing, and when you have that connection like that we had, not just me but my other teammates as well. Like, it was a fun like group of guys, and we just yelled off one another. We developed like little, like, we could tell when he was going to shoot. We could tell when we needed to crash. We could tell we needed to help a little more, defensively. It was just kind of, we were feeding off of his energy that he brought, and off the floor, we were selling out a lot of arenas. And when I say we, it's humbly he. He was kind of the reason for all that. And I
Team effort.
remember exactly, yeah, and it was amazing thing. I've never seen anything like it. We had people sleeping outside waiting to get into our games, and fans like literally screaming, waving me down to come over to them. And I would get over there and they're like, "Hey, can you tell Jimmer to come over here?" Like, it was kind of, but it was unbelievable experience. Like, you felt like you were, in the, with a rock star. And he's what makes it all even more enjoyable when I look back and think about it is he's the most nice, quiet, humble dude in the world. And just never used it to like pump his own ego. Like, as much as like, he's a walking bucket, basically, and he knows it, but he would never like tell you that, like, or talk smack to you unless he really was about to get in his bag. But anyways, it's
For sure. I mean, for a whole spring, essentially, I guess, because of March Madness, people usually shout Kobe when they shoot, but they were shooting Jimmer because they were just shooting threes all over the court. And that kind of leads into my question of, obviously, Jimmer went viral because of his three-point shot. You also have a nice jumper as well. Do you guys think that your games would have translated better to the modern era? Because it was kind of a little bit before the time. Like, Steph Curry obviously was around the same time, but he was just still getting in the league, getting his feet wet, and then he kind of changed the game as a whole. How do you think your games would have translated into the modern era of NBA basketball if you had entered the league today?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it, there's so much timing and luck and everything that goes into, like we spoke before. But I think, there's a lot of circumstance involved too. I think Jimmer would just, like, if he was nowadays, if he was we'll say in entering the draft like this year, he's definitely sticking a lot longer than he did, just based off of how the game has evolved. For as far as myself, I kind of feel like, I'm more of like an old school type big man. Like, I like to score on the block. I like to
For sure.
shoot mid range, and now the NBA game is kind of expanded into 3-and-D, just shoot threes and get back. So I mean, it's which I can shoot, and I work really hard at trying to become a better shooter every year. But I think Jimmer's game probably translates better into today's game more than mine would.
Gotcha. Gotcha. All right. I have two more little things I wanted to ask you, and it's a bit overused, but I wanted to play. I'm sure you've heard start bench cut. It's always over the place. So I want to ask you three
Mhm.
players that you've played with. Let's say you have to share front court with one other player. Kevin Garnett, Pau Gasol, Nikola Mirotic. So start bench cut, if you wouldn't mind, those three players. Obviously, all legends in their own right,
Mhm.
but your personal opinion.
Okay. Well, for sure I'm starting Nico.
Yep.
Um, and Paul, don't get it twisted. Pau Gasol can still play. I mean, he looks old. He looks like like he's far from playing, but he can still go. But I'll bring him off the bench, and I know KG won't see this or hear this, so he won't have anything bad to say to me. So I'd be worried if he did, but for now I'll have to cut him.
KG, you get on you for it.
I mean, hopefully he doesn't see it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And the last thing I wanted to end on this because I think it's important. Some general NBA fans who don't pay attention to overseas might be confused to hear Mirotic in conversation with guys like Paul Gasol and Kevin Garnett, who are obviously champions and stars at the NBA level. What's the difference between being a star in the NBA and being a star overseas? And just can you speak to just how great Mirotic has been, with his teams overseas that NBA fans might not appreciate?
Yeah, I mean, to be obviously the numbers game is so much different. I mean, to start in the NBA, you're averaging 30 or whatever, and you're just known for getting buckets, and there's guys like Kawhi who get it done on both ends and things like that. But um, there's there's a lot of guys who might not be as successful overseas as they are in the NBA, and that's I think some stars included. There's a lot that goes into the game overseas, and coaches aren't just letting guys score that like that. But guys like Mirotic, I mean, he can get you 30 a night if you let him. So um, and but he's one of those guys who really knowing himself, knowing his capabilities, and still takes a step back to be, team first and try to put winning above everything. Those are the guys who are hard to come by, and a lot of the stars in the NBA, they're all about if I get this amount of points, this many rebounds, that's going to up
Yeah,
my money. It can become less about either winning, more about the numbers. And so I think that's something that I learned from my time playing with Mirotic, as well as being able to adapt to all the stresses of EuroLeague and having to be that star on both ends of the floor, having to sacrifice your ego, having to be a star and still play a role at the same time. Like those are the sort of things that that's kind of intangible to me.
for sure. Yeah, well, that's all I had down here. I hope KG doesn't see it as well. Not that he would, but thank you, Brandon, for taking the time. I appreciate you hopping on here with me to talk basketball.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Thank you again to Brandon for joining me. Some great stories about his time in the NBA, the EuroLeague, and BYU in there. I hope you guys enjoyed that. But the last time we released an episode was September 1st, and it just so happened that later that day, Donovan Mitchell got traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the last thing I said about it was how the Knicks are still in it, talked about the RJ Barrett extension, but of course, the NBA decided to drop a bombshell, so I couldn't talk about it until a week later. But we are here now. Donovan Mitchell is a Cavalier. The New York Knicks extended RJ Barrett, and they lost the Donovan Mitchell trade race, and this is the package that the Utah Jazz got back in return for Mitchell. Cavaliers sent Collin Sexton, Lauri Markkanen, Ochai Agbaji, 3 unprotected first-round picks in 2025, 2027, and 2029, and 2 pick swaps in 2026 and 2028. A haul for Donovan Mitchell, an absolute haul. Excuse me, as reported by Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN. Woj also reporting that New York had the assets Utah preferred, and the side seemed to be inching closer to a trade Sunday night into Monday, but the Knicks balked on including Quentin Grimes and RJ Barrett in the deal. They tried to substitute Grimes for Emmanuel quickly, but then Utah wanted 3 unprotected first, but New York would only do a third pick that was protected. So a lot of stuff went on. I believe Woj also reported that the Knicks offered a deal earlier this summer of RJ Barrett, Mitchell Robinson, and Obi Toppin, and 3 unprotected first, which, if that was the case, that's a pretty good deal. And interesting why Utah didn't accept it, but we can talk about that later. The first thing I want to talk about is the deal itself. Cavaliers get Donovan Mitchell. The Jazz get players and picks. My biggest takeaway from the deal is, yes, the Cavs got better. Donovan Mitchell is the best player in that deal, but how close is it? Maybe this is my hot take. Maybe people will disagree. Is Donovan Mitchell, Lauri Markkanen, Ochai Agbaji, 3 first-round picks and 2 pick swaps better than Collin Sexton? I don't think so. I don't think he's that much better than Collin Sexton. And maybe that's crazy for me to say because obviously Donovan Mitchell, 3-time All-Star, he is the better player. It would be impossible to argue that Donovan Mitchell is not the better player. But when you look at their builds, Collin Sexton is a 6'1 shooting guard / point guard who can't really defend. Donovan Mitchell is a 6'1 shooting guard who can't really defend. They're the same archetype of player. Let's look at their peak seasons real quick. Donovan Mitchell's best season came in the 2020-2021 season. He averaged 26.4 points, 4.4 rebounds, 5.2 assists on 44% field goal percentage, will round up, and around 38.5% three-point percentage. Collin Sexton's best season also came in the 2020-21 season, averaged 24.3 points, 3.1 rebounds, 4.4 assists, shot 47.5% from the field, and 37% from 3. Those are about as close as you can get. He averaged a couple less points, I think around 1 less assist, maybe half an assist less. Yeah, around half an assist less, excuse me, and about 1 rebound less. Shot better from the field, Collin Sexton did, and shot 1% worse from 3 than Donovan Mitchell did, almost 2%. But at that point, you're picking at straws. What was the difference between those two teams? Why were the Cavaliers awful that year, and why were the Jazz good? Well, Donovan Mitchell had All-Star Rudy Gobert on his team that year. He had, I believe, Mike Conley was also an All-Star that year. Bojan Bogdanovic, Jordan Clarkson, who maybe was that his 6th Man of the Year season, maybe it was the year after his 6th Man of the Year season, regardless. Joe Ingles, who was also another 6th Man of the Year candidate. Georges Niang, Royce O'Neal, Derek Favors, stacked team. I mean, they were, what was their record this year? They were 52-20, first in the Western Conference. They had a great team around Donovan Mitchell. Give Mitchell credit for leading them in scoring, but he was able to play his role because Rudy Gobert anchored one of the best defenses in the league. They had solid wing defenders around him. Obviously, they've tapered off in the past 2 seasons, but Donovan Mitchell, not a defender, not a good defender, hasn't been. Mike Conley was a better defender that year. Joe Ingles was obviously out there defending, Royce O'Neal as well. But again, those guys have tapered off. But that season, they were one of the best defenses in the league built around Rudy Gobert. Collin Sexton, meanwhile, had a second-year Darius Garland, who was solid. But after that, he had rotating centers, Andre Drummond for 25 games, Jared Allen for 50 games, who wasn't at the All-Star level he was this past season. They had Kevin Love, a disgruntled Kevin Love at that, who was throwing tantrums on the court. They've resolved that now, but you remember 2 seasons ago, Kevin Love was not happy to be a Cleveland Cavalier. Chetty Osman was, I believe, their 4th leading scorer, and he's fine. He's fine for them now. But Taurean Prince also there, Isaac Okoro, who is still coming into his own. Then they had rotating guys of Yogi Ferrell, who played a couple games there. Larry Nance played 35 games there. Hartenstein played 16. JaVale McGee was there for 33 years. Damian Dotson played 46 games. Quinn Cook was there for 7 games. Dean Wade, Dylan Windler. They had 25 guys on their regular season roster who appeared in a game for them that season, the Cavaliers. The Jazz had... Where is this? The Jazz had 18. So it's hard to compare the two because of how different their teams were. But if you look at the raw numbers, they're pretty much the same, right? And again, obviously, Donovan Mitchell is the better player. But is he, I'm going to say it again, is he Lauri Markkanen, Ochai Agbaji, who's essentially a first-round pick, 3 unprotected first-round picks and 2 pick swaps better than Donovan Mitchell? I can't be convinced that that's the case. I don't think there's a world where Donovan Mitchell is that much better than the Cavaliers. Now, does he make the team better? Yes. I think he does make the team better, because you also have to account for Darius Garland's going to improve. Jared Allen's going to improve. Evan Mobley's going to make the jump. That's another guy. You look at the guys, and you can sit there and ask, oh, well, why were the Cavs good when Collin Sexton was out? Darius Garland jumped into being an all-star. He averaged 22 points and almost 9 assists. Jared Allen was an all-star. He averaged 16 and 11 with 1.3 blocks. Evan Mobley was new. He was a rookie. 15 points there, 8 rebounds. Some of the best defense we've seen from a rookie outside of maybe Herb Jones, who was also this year's class, which is crazy. Lauri Markkanen was there, and people can clown on Lauri Markkanen because he didn't pan out in Chicago. He averaged 15 points on 45% for shooting from the field and 36% shooting from three. He had a good season in Cleveland. Karis LeVert was there for half the year. They signed Ricky Rubio, who played an important role at the start of the season for them. Kevin Love turned things around and accepted his role. Isaac Okoro had more experience. Cedi Osman had more experience. Like, they had a much more established team, and Collin Sexton wasn't a part of it. If Collin Sexton was there, the Cavs could have been in the playoffs. And they traded him, Lauri Markkanen, who was a 15-point per game scorer for them, Ochai Agbaji, who was probably going to be a great rotation piece for them, 3 firsts and 2 protected firsts for Donovan Mitchell. The star power is there. It was a win-now move for the Cavs, and they got better because of it. But I don't think it's as slam dunk of a trade as people are talking about. I don't think the upgrade from Collin Sexton to Donovan Mitchell is as significant as the pieces they gave up to make the deal. Will it work out for them? I don't know. It's tough to think about the Cavs being a true Eastern Conference contender, because right now they're still in danger of being stuck in the play-in. That's how deep the Eastern Conference is. The Celtics, the Bucks, the Sixers, the Raptors, the Heat, the Nets, the Cavs. That's 7 teams right there. Let me count that again. Boston, Milwaukee, 2. Toronto, Miami, Brooklyn, Philly, Cleveland. That's 7 teams who are all playoff caliber teams, and one will have to be in the play-in. And that's without even counting teams like the Bulls and the Knicks and the Wizards, who will also probably try to be good. And the Hawks. I didn't even say the Hawks, who just traded for DeJounte Murray. I just named, 11 teams? One of those teams isn't going to be in the play-in, let alone the playoffs. Does this Cavs trade make them better? Yes. Was it worth it for them to give up all those assets when Collin Sexton was going to be coming off an injury? I don't think so. Plus, you consider the price points. Collin Sexton inked a, 4-year, $70 million extension? I think it was $18 a year, so do that math out. But he's cheaper. He's about $12 million, maybe almost $15 million cheaper than Donovan Mitchell. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but significantly cheaper option. You would have had Lauri Markkanen still. You would have had all your first-round picks to make a deal if you wanted to in the future. I just don't get it. I don't want to say I don't get it, because I do get it. You get an all-star, 3-time all-star. He's going to be an all-star in the Eastern Conference. They're going to be better. They're probably, knock on wood, going to be a playoff team. But I just don't think he is that big of an upgrade over Collin Sexton when you account for what they had to give up in the deal. And I think that's what could come back to bite Cleveland in the trade. And for Utah, I mean, shout out Utah. They got a haul for him. Collin Sexton should be good, and at the very least, he'll be good trade bait for them down the line. Because I think he's underrated at this point. I think Collin Sexton can be a solid score-first guard on a contending team. You just got to put him in the right role, whether that's a Lou Will role or, whatever. But all I'm saying is, if you put Collin Sexton in Donovan Mitchell's position on some of those Utah teams, they're still a playoff team. And you can say they wouldn't be as good, but what do you consider not as good? Because those Jazz teams failed horribly in the playoffs. They didn't get past the second round. That's why they had to blow the team up. So I don't think there would have been a big difference on those Jazz teams if you had replaced Mitchell with Collin Sexton. And I think the Cavs gave up too much in addition to Sexton to get Mitchell, because I don't think it's as big of an upgrade as people think. And lastly, I wanted to talk about the report from Woj about the Knicks offer at the start of the summer for Donovan Mitchell. He tweeted it out in tandem with the report that the Cavaliers landed Mitchell in a trade. He tweeted this: at the start of trade talks in July, New York offered Utah a Donovan Mitchell trade package including RJ Barrett, Obi Toppin, Mitchell Robinson, and 3 unprotected first-round picks. Jazz turned that down, and then Robinson signed a $60 million extension to stay with New York. Now, if that was a trade offer, Utah might have messed up. because that package for Donovan Mitchell is crazy. And is it better than the one they got from Cleveland is debatable. RJ Barrett versus Collin Sexton, I guess it depends. I think Collin Sexton's probably just barely the better player right now, barely. And maybe I wouldn't even say that. I think they're fairly in an even playing field, but in terms of potential, RJ Barrett is far better than Collin Sexton in a deal. But did they want to pay him $30 million? Would they rather stick with Collin Sexton's deal and have it more tradable down the line? Maybe. Would RJ Barrett win them too many games? I don't know. Obi Toppin showed a ton of promise at the end of last year for the Knicks, giving him the starting spot on a rebuilding Jazz team. I think he could really blow up, so that would have been great. And then Mitchell Robinson is another solid prospect too, if you give him enough playing time and the freedom to do what he can do. 3 unprotected firsts is what would be huge. And the biggest difference, I think, in this trade is obviously RJ Barrett, I think, would be the best player they could have gotten back in a Donovan Mitchell trade. But I think the value of those Knicks picks would probably outweigh the value of the Cavs picks they got, because I think a Knicks team with Donovan Mitchell and no RJ Barrett is a much worse team than the current Cavaliers team with Donovan Mitchell. And so I think those firsts from New York would have been better. So it's a bit confusing why the Jazz turned that down reportedly. I mean, I listened to Trevor Lane and Ron Gutterman, excuse me if I said that wrong, on the NBA Front Office show today, and talking about how, maybe they didn't actually offer that. This could just be the Knicks posturing to appease their fans so they're not too mad. But it's weird the way the Knicks acted afterwards, because as soon as the Donovan Mitchell trade went through, they flooded their timeline with RJ Barrett. I'll call it propaganda. Just, highlights, pictures saying King of New York. He posted a picture to Instagram. As soon as the Donovan Mitchell trade talks were over, they were all in on RJ Barrett. And I think that's a really dangerous way to run an organization. The Knicks are effectively throwing him in trade packages all summer, as reported by Woj at the very least. And then as soon as the trade talks end, they're like, "Oh no, we love you, man. Like, thank you for all you do. We're so happy you're back." And they kind of, this was pointed out on the Front Office show again, kind of dangled that extension deadline as, "Okay, Jazz, if you're not going to do this, then we're going to extend RJ Barrett." And the podcast I listened to said, the Jazz probably didn't like that, but if I'm RJ Barrett, I don't like to hear that either. You're telling me that you're using extending me as a threat, like that's the bad option in a trade. Like, I take a little offense to that if I'm RJ Barrett. Like, yeah, you can't complain too much because you got a 4-year, $120 million deal. Like, you're rich. That's generational wealth. You're going to be set for life, but I want to play somewhere I'm wanted. And from the way the Knicks are putting things out, it sounds like they were more than willing to go with RJ Barrett in a deal. And you hear reports that they even like Quentin Grimes more than RJ Barrett. Tom Thibodeau saying that, members of the Knicks organization, which is crazy. I don't understand how RJ Barrett's become so severely undervalued, because honestly, I wouldn't have traded him straight up for Donovan Mitchell. Maybe that makes me crazy, but I think RJ Barrett has more potential to develop into a two-way star wing and be better than Donovan Mitchell, because Mitchell doesn't play defense, and you already have a score-first guard in Jalen Brunson, and obviously Donovan Mitchell is better than Jalen Brunson, but in terms of what fits that team, I would much rather build around RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, Obi Toppin, this young group you have, and also compete with Jalen Brunson on the roster and figure out Julius Randle later. But they were so willing to give up RJ Barrett for Donovan Mitchell, and even used him as a threat. Use extending him as a threat, and then as soon as the deal went through, they're, "Oh no, we love you." It seems very weird to me. I think RJ Barrett's fine. I mean, again, like I said, he got paid, he got the bag, but something to monitor maybe, because I wouldn't be too happy if that's what ended up happening if I'm RJ Barrett, because it just seems shady. The whole thing that happened with New York and RJ Barrett and Donovan Mitchell seems very shady. And thank you so much for listening to another week, another episode of the Simone NBA Show. Thank you again to Brandon Davies for joining me for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed that interview. Hopefully we'll have some great ones for you guys down the line as well. Ignore the voice crack there. We're going to leave it in though. But I've been your host, Jack Simone. You can check me out on Twitter at JackSimoneNBA. Check out Heavy on Twitter at HeavyOnSports. Check out other social handles, which is next to me on YouTube. And, I'll add that in there here. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is just Heavy on YouTube. It's just Heavy. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. I'll see you guys next week. Peace out.